Hello. My presentation today is going to explore a crucial yet often overlooked dimension of the world's greatest ancient civilization, the influence of women in the New Kingdom of Egypt. When we think of ancient Egypt, we almost always universally picture a patriarchal society, one that is dominated by powerful male pharaohs like Ramses II and an all-male priesthood. This is the common historical myth, and it's certainly true that men held the highest political offices, but this limited perspective completely overlooks the complexity of gender roles during the New Kingdom. Today, I argue that this simple patriarchal label is insufficient. There is much more to ancient Egypt than this simple definition. Women were excluded from the high political positions, of course, but their power was still significant and absolutely crucial to the stability of Egyptian society. Their influence was substantial because the formal political structures often left gaps which women were uniquely positioned to fill. We must redefine what we mean by power in this context. It wasn't always the throne or imperial power, but even the ability to sustain authority, recognize, and reorganize societal structures from within. Women in the New Kingdom were able to exert power through three main methods: religious and imperial methods, which ultimately shows that the Egyptian patriarchy was something that was constantly negotiated rather than stagnant. We will explore this through three main areas: legal and economic independence, religious authority, and royal assent and imperial power. Women in the New Kingdom of Egypt had significant advantages when it comes to rights and even opportunities that they were afforded, compared to women in virtually every other ancient civilization, even ones like Greece and Rome. Egyptian women had truly unique rights. They were not considered to be the property of male relatives nor the dependent of a male relative. They have rights that date as far back as the Middle Kingdom, giving them a kind of autonomy that women in later societies would not possess for thousands of years. Women in the New Kingdom could own, inherit, and actually manage their own property completely separate from their husbands. This included land, slaves, goods. This wasn't merely a symbolic gesture. Instead, legal documents proved that they engaged in business matters, often selling land, slaves, and goods in the marketplace. This economic independence is a huge factor in their overall societal power, as it means their social standing was not entirely dependent on the goodwill or status of a male relative. In addition, their legal standing was also respected in the court system. Women had the right to initiate contracts, and they could even serve as witnesses in legal proceedings. This this shows that their testimony was given weight and credibility, and their thoughts were given weight and credibility within the judicial system, but also within society. The documents from this period confirm these freedoms were not just theoretical, they were practiced daily, forming a core part of a woman's identity in Egypt. One of the strongest indicators of financial equality in marriage was the right that women had to divorce. A woman could initiate a divorce, and in doing so, she also had the right to retain her marriage assets and any kind of prenuptial agreement. So this meant that if she had inherited land or purchased land prior to her marriage, she was entitled to keep it. This right gave women tremendous financial security and equality within the marriage contract. In addition, they would often be given a small portion or half of the marital assets, things that have been acquired during the marriage. The lack of financial dependence meant that the Egyptian patriarchy was constrained by a deep respect for a woman's economic identity. Unlike other societies, she wasn't completely reliant on her husband. She had the right and could exercise the right to divorce or marry anytime she wished. Now that we understand their power, we're looking more at the religious aspect. Women also served in highly respected religious roles, which provided both social status and spiritual influence. They often served the cults of the great goddesses, such as Thor, the goddess of love and motherhood, or Isis, the goddess of magic and the throne. These women would serve as priestesses, singers, and musicians within these temple cults. And these positions were not considered minor. Instead, they were highly respected, allowing access to temple wealth and communal influence. The priestesses often handled the sacred duties and rituals essential for maintaining love or cosmic order. One of the most prestigious titles that a woman in a religious role could hold, especially for royal women or daughters, was the God's wife of Amun. This title granted immense religious and social authority within the powerful cult of the state god Amun, whose temple was located in Karnak. The God's wife title was not only spiritual, it was also political and related a lot to the economy. The woman who held this position controlled vast temple estates and even the financial resources of the Amun cult. So this enormous amount of control over finances meant that she acted as a critical mediator between the priesthood and the royal family, often blurring the lines between religion and imperial power. Her control over one of the wealthiest institutions of Egypt is just a prime example of power being exerted through an indirect religious channel. The authority gained from this position ultimately gave women power over the priests. So not only did it provide access to national wealth, but gave them the power to influence important political decisions. Royal mothers and wives were also highly respected and were given the title Great Royal Wives or Great Royal Wife, which allowed them to wield great influence directly and indirectly. They were the center of the royal family. A royal woman could also hold formal political power by serving as regent before a young pharaoh came of age. These women were an essential part of stability within the dynasty. Not only did they ensure the line of succession, but they also made sure that when it became time for a new pharaoh to take over, the transition was smooth, especially if that pharaoh was too young to rule. Serving as regent in that sense allowed them control over the state, as they had complete control over the state's affairs and other matters. The ultimate example of a female regent and female regent rising to power is in the story of Hatshepsut. She served briefly as regent for her stepson, Thutmose III, but she eventually declared herself pharaoh, a rare but highly successful challenge to the system. Not only did she rule as regent, but she declared herself the sole ruler. Her reign was successful, and she was known, and her reign was known for extensive building projects and highly successful trade expeditions. Hatshepsut proved that a woman could lead the state with strength and efficiency. Not only was Hatshepsut's ascension to the throne unique, but she introduced an interesting strategy for doing so. She presented herself using both male and female qualities. Often, when she was depicted in icons, she was depicted with a male pharaoh's beard and male features. She did this deliberately, and this was likely a strategic choice to legitimize her rule while also attempting to maintain tradition. Another example of a royal woman who wielded considerable influence is Nefertiti. Nefertiti was the great royal wife of Akhenaten. She was extremely visible, and she was a constant presence alongside her husband during a particularly difficult time during Egyptian history. She participated in religious rituals and was often depicted as equal to her husband. Nefertiti's influence was beyond the typical role of a queen during this period. Art from this period often shows her as the same scale as her husband, Akhenaten. Some scholars even speculate that she may have served as a co-regent later in the reign, demonstrating power that exceeded the traditional queen's role. Some believe that she even acted as regent for a time after his death. Power and influence were not reserved only for wealthy women or high-class women. The primary source and location of power for women who were not royal and who were not of a higher class was the home. Women had considerable authority in managing their household as they raised children, they managed household duties, they managed the production of goods like brewing daily beer, and they also managed any servants that were present. Because of this, women were highly valued within their role of raising children and maintaining the family. This allowed their husbands to go out and participate and work for the state, therefore ensuring that society ran smoothly and supporting the state as well. This role of women ensured not only reproduction, social reproduction, but also stability within society. Tomb art from this period often shows couples as equals. It shows them at the same scale instead of depicting women as submissive. This is extremely uncommon, as many other ancient cultures and civilizations of the time often depicted women as submissive or smaller in images and art. But instead, Egypt had them side by side. They were shown side by side at an equal scale. These images show the value of women's contributions to their society as well as their respective positions. These images, with showing this equality, also show the importance that Egyptian women had in Egyptian society and how respected and revered they were for that role. The power of Egyptian women was a fundamental part of Egyptian society. They were able to sustain influence through legal, economic, religious, and imperial means, allowing them to be active in the family and the state. The patriarchy itself was not simple, it was more complex, and it was often negotiated instead of being something that was stagnant. Ancient Egypt stands out as particularly progressive compared to other ancient civilizations of the time. Their position on women's rights was exceptionally advanced compared to the others. The legal independence of women highlights the complexity of Egyptian society. This complexity helps us to understand this specific society and understand how the civilization worked itself. Thank you for watching and listening. Any sources that were used for this research are linked below on the following page. Thank you.